My name is Jessica, and I am a returned Peace Corps volunteer, and I also work at UCF, where I recruit for the U.S. Peace Corps. And a couple of the really neat things about the program is that Peace Corps has 3 goals that they've really held true to their commitment since 1961. And the first goal of Peace Corps is for us to identify skilled, trained men and women in the U.S., identify their skills to send them to a country that is requesting their skill sets. We are there to reflect a really positive image for the American culture, but also to gain a lot of information about what that culture is like and bring that information back home to our family and friends. So our service doesn't end in Peace Corps after our 27 months. We're also going to talk about, through just informal conversations, letters, emails, about the country and the culture that we serve in. I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I thought I wanted to do the Peace Corps. I wasn't sure if I was ready for the commitment, so I ended up joining AmeriCorps NCCC for 2 years. And once I completed that program for 2 years, I realized, all right, I'm ready for Peace Corps. And so a few years later, I joined the program, and I joined about 80 other volunteers who were going over to South Africa at that time. In the cohort of volunteers that I went over with, there were 30 volunteers who were health volunteers, and 50 that were education volunteers. Now, the median age of a volunteer is 28 years old. But in my group of 30 volunteers in the health program, I had 10 volunteers that were 60 plus, which was awesome because it was the first time that I developed relationships with people that were over 60 that were friends with me because of me, not because they had to say hi to me and talk to me, because I was their friend's kid. So it was a unique opportunity to establish that relationship. Over 50, 7% are over 50, and then 90% do have a college degree. Now that 10% typically falls in line with people who were raised on a farm, people who started their own business or are heavily involved in IT. So there are several different programs that you can qualify for, or there are some environment programs as well. So not all of the programs require a degree. It does, however, need to have a lot of experience to support that. 20% are minorities, and that has increased over the last several years, so that's great. And then 61% are women and 39% are men, while 93% are single and 7% are married. So when Peace Corps sends you to your 2-year assignment, they cluster you with other volunteers. And by cluster, that means a volunteer could either be 2 hours away or 30 minutes away from you. So my closest shopping town was in the center of my palm right here. I was about 30 minutes outside of that shopping town, and there was another volunteer that was 2 hours away, another volunteer that was an hour away, and another volunteer that was 45 minutes away. And so on the weekends, we would all take the local transportation and come to the local city, and that's where we would do our shopping, maybe have lunch together, or go to someone else's home and have a sleepover. So I had the convenience of having other volunteers that were near me. There was another volunteer that was very rural, and he was in the mountains and had to wash his clothes in the river, bathe in the river as well, and his closest volunteer was 2 hours away. So it's really situational. The neat thing is, though, when you're first assigned to your country, you have 3 months of training in your host country, and they send all of the volunteers together to the same community. So you're all living together in the same community, but in separate housings with host families. So that's your opportunity to really build a unique bond with the other volunteers and establish a good relationship and a support network. After those 3 months is when you're all dispersed into your own individual sites, into your own individual community, and that's where this is for me right here. During the training time as well, it's really crucial because you're going to learn the local language. You don't need to know a language to join Peace Corps because during the 3 months we'll teach you the language. It's an intensive language program where you're going to be taught the language by a host country national. It could be pretty informal where you're learning the language in a local market where they challenge you to purchase certain produce, or it could be in the grass field. It just depends on the community that you're in. It's also the time when you're going to learn about the culture. You're living with the host family, but you're also going to be interacting with the other local people. And then the final thing is we're going to be building upon your productive competence. So whatever skill set you're bringing into that community, we're going to build upon that. For example, if you're in the education program, the way you teach people in America is going to be really different than the way you teach people here in the US. So we're going to have you learn by the teachers in that community and help you develop their curriculum or effective teaching methods, whatever your assignment is for that time frame. For me, as a volunteer in South Africa, I worked for an organization called the Sekakuni Educare Project, and they had two hats. Basically, one was safety nets for children, and the other one was the Montessori teachings for kids. And I knew nothing about teaching, and I just sort of was able to dabble in that program sector a little bit. But I did a lot of HIV/AIDS education, helped to develop a solid curriculum to teach home-based care workers about HIV/AIDS, so then they could go into the villages where women lived that didn't have access to a clinic to teach them about healthy ways of living. And I also worked with the Department of Social Development to help to develop a policy that affected orphans and kids made vulnerable by HIV/AIDS. You have secondary projects as well. And so Megan touched upon that for a moment, that the secondary projects are really a great thing because you're able to dabble in areas that you have a personal interest in. So for example, I love to bake, I love to eat, and a lot of the people there would make mashed potatoes with like cups and cups of oil. And I thought, well, this isn't healthy. And so I would teach them healthy ways to make their mashed potatoes. I do cooking classes, make cookies with the kids. And that also taught them how to measure things. So you can implement different things as well. If you are at a school, you can have a garden, help people create produce. If you have a surplus of the produce, you can sell that in a market. Now you're teaching the kids not only how to grow their own vegetables and have sustainability, but you're also teaching them about how to manage a budget. So you can go into a different sector if you want on your secondary project. You're not obligated to do that same thing in your secondary project that you are in your primary project. So the nice thing about Peace Corps is they're really transparent in everything that could potentially happen in that country, and they're very strict. Safety and your health are the two top priorities for them. And so during the training, let me back up. In each Peace Corps country that we have, there's a Peace Corps office. And in that Peace Corps office, it's typically in the capital. That's where your Peace Corps director is. That's where your program directors are. That's where your safety and security officer is housed, and that's where your health officer is housed as well. So you have all of the really important people in the capital, and you have access to get to them at any time that you need. And so during the 3-month training, the safety and security officer met with us several times, telling us how to be mindful of our safety, particularly for females and males, and just as being a person. People are dispersed all over the world for education, and whatever program you're assigned to, you're always going to dabble in the education field because people are always going to want to learn English. Whether it's formally, maybe your secondary project is tutoring kids, or maybe it's informally through a host family or friends who want to learn English. So that's a program that you're always going to have some experience in. Health and HIV/AIDS is the second strongest program. And that's a program, just like education, that you're going to have some sort of say in, because a lot of the areas may be affected, or probably are, with either TB, malaria, or HIV, or some other illness that affects that area. So whether it's through an awareness campaign or through education, talking about the issue itself, you're always going to be dabbling in the health program as well. And then your business and environment, youth development, and agriculture. Since 1961, we've served in 139 countries. We serve in over 70 countries right now, with over 210,000 return Peace Corps volunteers who have served in other communities around the world. Each country that Peace Corps serves in is asking for a particular skill set. So in South Africa, they were only asking for volunteers who had skills in health and education. So if you're an agriculture volunteer, like Megan was, she wouldn't qualify to serve in South Africa because they're not asking for that skill set. So there's varying factors to determine why you're placed, where you're placed, and that's number one. Is the country asking for my skill set? Number two, does the country program, when it starts, am I available to leave then? You may be available to go in June, but that program in that country may start in April. It doesn't line up, so you're not eligible to go to that country. And finally, we need to make sure that that country has the medical accommodations to meet your needs of where you're serving. So we need to make sure that the facilities are there that are appropriate to ensure your health while you're a volunteer. So those are the three factors that we consider in terms of where we place you. You do have a geographic preference as to where you'd like to serve, and by that I mean you have a continental preference. So when I was in the supermarket in DC, I was holding a bag and it said Peace Corps on it, and this gentleman was behind me and he says, "Are you in the Peace Corps?" And I said, "I work for them now, but I was." And he goes, "Oh." I go, "How do you know them?" And he said, because I lived in Ghana and I was taught English by a Peace Corps volunteer. And I said, well, what are you doing here? He goes, that volunteer helped me get a scholarship to go to college in America. It gets me so emotional. And so now I live here and I'm able to support my family in Ghana because of that experience. So it continues on, and that's one of the benefits, getting back to this, is of becoming a Peace Corps volunteer. You also get that training that we talked about at the beginning, those first 3 months. There's no application fee. And then you also get a monthly living allowance that covers your food, housing, and transportation. The income that you receive through that is the median income of someone who does the same job as you in that community. The only difference is typically they're supporting a family of 8 where you only have to support yourself. So it's enough to live off of, and I certainly did not feel like I was starving for money. I was able to travel in country with that as well. So there's a lot of good things. When I came back, I had a hard time transitioning, so I signed up for a program that Peace Corps offered. It's called the Peace Corps Mentoring Program. And I got to figure out, do I want to partner with a female, a male? What's the age bracket that I want to partner with? Ended up being assigned to this gentleman. His name was Rob, and he was in DC. He had worked for National Geographic for about 30 years. He was a writer. And as soon as I found that out, I was like, score, because I love National Geographic. So he set me up with a bunch of different interviews. So not only did he help me with my transition and just figuring out what I wanted to do with Peace Corps, he also led me down an avenue that I probably wouldn't have had the opportunity to have access to otherwise. And I woke up and I would prepare my bath and have breakfast with my mom and pa. And then I would walk to my organization through a sea of children. That would be, lahua, lahua, which meant white girl. And I was like, no, it is Lerato. That was my African name, which means love. And then I would get to my organization, and in the morning, I had a counterpart. So there's one person in your organization that, as I mentioned before, helps to facilitate the projects. But you're never working on a project by yourself, because you want to make sure that everything that you do is sustainable. So with Megan, she was helping to build pit latrines, but she probably wasn't the actual builder. She was helping to facilitate the build, because if she leaves and no one knows how to do it, your project falls apart. So a lot of the times I was working with this particular individual, Shadrach, who is amazing, just a fantastic person who loves and is very vibrant with children. And we would do a lot of workshops to help gain information from children who were affected, who had parents or brothers or sisters that were affected by HIV and AIDS. And so we helped to establish a lot of workshops. We would travel to the local provinces, and throughout the course of the day, we'd be meeting with several different people in the community through theater projects that we had as well. At lunch, I was introduced to what is mine is ours. I had a plate of food, and then I had 5 hands, and then 6 hands, and then 7 hands, and everybody eats off of the same plate. After lunch, we'd continue on with our project, and then afterwards, I'd go for a run through the village, and I would have 10 kids running after me. One day, I took a different route when I was walking home from work, and these kids would always see me and greet me after school, but I went a different route. Well, they ended up coming to my home a couple hours later, and they asked where I was because they thought something had happened to me. So it's nice to know. I was like, I have little angels looking out for me. I had no idea. And so that was very gratifying for me. And then that evening, I'd be forced to go to choir practice, or I'd go walking with my mom, because she's so cute. She's like, Jessica, we must do physical fitness. We must go do physical fitness. And we'd go walking through the village. And then, we had a TV, and so I would watch soccer with my pa, because he was obsessed with soccer. And then I would read a book, and literally I got the most sleep in Peace Corps, because I would go to bed when the sun set, and I would wake up when the sun rose. And that's just your lifestyle, and you just adapt to it. I hope the takeaway that you got was that Peace Corps is a very personal experience, and it's a very personal one to everybody. There's no one Peace Corps experience. I was always reaching for that Peace Corps experience that I really envisioned for myself, and it wasn't there the first part of my service, and I extended for 5 months because I found it during that second part of my service. But it does require that you settle your expectations, and that you are a sponge in that community, and you have the ability to learn and listen and understand and appreciate a culture that's different than your own, and to be able to adapt, because adaptability and flexibility and patience are three of the top things, as well as a good sense of humor, that help to make you a successful volunteer. It's an experience of a lifetime. It's one you can't buy. It's government funded, which I love because everything is free. You have amazing medical benefits. I always felt safe, and if anything happened, that they would take care of me. And I always had, Big Brother watching over me. And so it was nice, and I felt very safe being part of this program. And it was also an opportunity that I wanted to do before I hit 30. It was something I wanted to do on my own. And looking back on it, I'm so thankful that I was an active participant in my life, and I didn't sit on the sidelines and think that I wish that was something I would have done in my 20s. I really do. Because now life happens, and you never know when you're going to get that chance to join the program and to have those 2 years to set aside to do something like this. So whether you're 65 or 20 and it's something that you've always wanted to do it, find that time to do it. Our oldest currently serving volunteer is 83 years old. So that's proof you're never too old to give back and to help a community and to be selfless and to make a difference. So with that, I thank you all for coming, and if you have any questions or want to talk about Peace Corps more and just get some of our perspectives, grab my business card. But I hope you all have a wonderful holiday season, and you're just really thankful for what you have, and you share goodness throughout. So thanks for coming, everybody.